Hi everyone, this is just a short video to give you a bit of extra information for part 3 of our third assessment, which is requiring you to critically analyse reading recovery. So I'm just going to give you a bit of extra information about what the reading recovery program is and what our expectations are for your critical analysis. So for those of you who aren't familiar with reading recovery, it's an individual intervention program that takes place in the second year of primary school, so after their foundation year. All right, so at the beginning of their second year of school, those students who are deemed at risk in the literacy area are recommended for reading recovery, and then they undergo testing, and some of those students are selected to take part in the program. It's run by a trained teacher. That training involves a full year of training, fairly intensive, with then in following years ongoing PD. The PD can be with other reading recovery teachers in groups, and you watch each other teach lessons, or it might involve the reading recovery tutor coming to your school and watching you do lessons and giving you feedback. So it's pretty extensive and intensive. The sessions run for 30 minutes every day, so 5 days a week, and can last up to 20 weeks in the year. So some students will come off earlier than 20 weeks. It usually ranges between 12 and 20 weeks. It requires support from the parents, so the parents have to sort of basically sign up for this and carry out sort of homework activities every night with the student. And after the student comes off reading recovery and goes and is integrated back into the classroom, there's ongoing support from the reading recovery teacher within the classroom as well. Now, this is a critical analysis of the reading recovery program. So a lot of you will have received feedback on your critical analysis that you've done for assessment 1 and assessment 2. So take on that feedback. Basically, what we're wanting you to do with this one is to look at the theories behind reading recovery, look at the strengths of the program and find evidence in the academic literature to support those strengths. Look at the weaknesses or the limitations that the program might have, and find supporting evidence for that as well, and then come up with a conclusion about what your opinion is on the reading recovery program. So to specifically do that, there are some areas that you might need to look at in the reading recovery program. For example, you might look at how are the students chosen. There are quite strict rules about the selection criteria for students. So you might look at the age limitations that are on there. You might look at the fact that they're not chosen until the second year of school, and try and debate one way or the other whether you think that's a good thing. Look at the assessments that are used. The assessments are a battery of tests called the observation survey. With the observation survey, the students are given the assessment at the start of the intervention, and that's actually how they're selected initially. And then there's another observation survey that happens at the end of the assessment, which is done by another reading recovery teacher. So it's sort of like an independent test at the end to check what levels they're at. Look at the resources that are required for a program like this. Apart from having a trained, experienced teacher, so the teacher is not a graduate teacher, it has to be a teacher with quite a bit of experience to be accepted into the program. So the school has to supply the teacher. What other resources are needed, like space and equipment? Look at the methods of teaching reading that are used in the reading recovery lessons. There's a very strict set out for each 30-minute lesson, which you'll be able to find in the reading information. And look at the methods that are used to teach reading. The methods for teaching reading are actually listed in week 10 in the learning materials. There's a whole list there of different ways of teaching reading. Have a look at those and then work out which ones of those the reading recovery program uses, and make a judgment one way or the other, using supporting evidence, of course, to decide whether you think that it's on track and teaching reading the correct way or the best way. Look at the appropriateness of reading recovery for the students. So, is it culturally appropriate for every student? In Australia now we have many ESL students, we have Indigenous students. Um, you might decide that it might not be appropriate for every student. Look at whether it addresses 21st century learning, as we talked about in assessment 1. Does it allow for multiliteracies, semiotic systems? Uh, does it allow for digital learning? Is ICT involved in any way? Look at the cost of the program. Is it a cost-effective way of improving literacy outcomes for students? So they're just some of the areas that you might look at when you're analysing the program to decide whether you think it's a worthwhile reading program for schools to run. All the information that you need for this assessment is in week 10 readings, but of course we're wanting you to look wider than that. So a high distinction mark will be given to someone, or possibly given to someone who has shown us that they've read widely and have used that evidence to support their arguments. One of the areas that you might like to examine in your analysis is the debate about constructivist teaching of reading versus explicit teaching of reading. Now, there's mention of that in the week 10 learning materials as well. You might decide whether reading recovery takes one approach or the other, and then that might help you come to some sort of decision as to whether you think it's a worthwhile program or not. Okay, so that's a basic outline of the program. That's the sort of things that we're wanting you to do for this section of the critical analysis. Please make use of the discussion board, the question and answer in the discussion board. Some of you have already had your Collaborate, but if you haven't come armed with questions to the Collaborate, if you still things that you're not sure about, and remember, read the assessment materials carefully so you know exactly what's required. Okay, so good luck with assessment 3, and we'll be looking forward to reading your submissions.